Hello and welcome to Uncommon Sense. Dean Holmes and Craig Kouimanis here live and together once again. You can't do that on a screen. Ladies and gentlemen, we've jumped straight into a theme of things that we often get ourselves into, which is our Uncommon Sense rant.
Oh, the rant.
So we pick a topic, play each side of it, and actually talk about things that we probably should all talk about, but potentially controversial or potentially something to make sure we set ourselves up and the industry for success. So Craig Kouimanis, what are we delving into today?
Mate, it's this age-old message that we keep hearing about, we need to make advice more affordable for Australians and all of the palaver that goes around that and what needs to change and what should change and how it should change. And guess what, Dean? None of it's changed. So let's shift the narrative a little bit today and take it from how do we make advice more affordable to how do we actually make advice more accessible to people in Australia? How do we want them to want advice? How do we get them to want advice? And for me, there's only one owner of that, and that is the financial advice firms that you and I work with on a day-to-day basis. Hopefully the financial advice firms that listen to this on a fortnightly basis. It's up to us to own that narrative. It's not up to big super funds and government to own that. It's up to advice firms to own that.
Yeah, and so to delve into the definition, which is a bit of the rant at the end of the day, we're talking today about opening up advice to make it more accessible. And so it's not necessarily an affordability thing. The big change that's happened, I think, is that other people talking about our industry has made it an affordability thing. And so we know that removing red tape may not change the price. Our focus today is the accessibility of it. Our example that we'll come back to is the real estate agent is able to charge 4 times or 5 times or beyond what a typical financial advisor may charge. And they've been able to ensure and continue to ensure their role within the industry and within their industry. And so I think the first thing that I want to ask you, Craig, is what can the advice practices stop doing that they're currently doing as a collective? What do they need to stop doing that is actually negatively impacting this view?
You'll think, mate, let's start with that beautiful document we all know and love, the statement of advice, right? It's had so much focus. We don't want it anymore. We don't want to use it. You need to give us something better. Clients don't care about it. But this document's been around for quite a while now. Now, okay, they want to change it back to a customer advice record, which we used to have before that. But the reality is a document or a document like this now, I know sometimes they've been smaller and sometimes they're bigger and whatever it is, they've been around the whole time. And I deal with successful financial advice firms, and as they should, every single one of them gives out SOAs or the appropriate advice document that they have to give. And there seems to be this focus on that it's so much in the way, yet all of these firms look after their clients exceptionally well. They grow new clients and they're profitable. So is it really, and I know there'll be people watching this going, Craig, I can't believe you're saying that, shut up. But is it really in the way, or is that an excuse or a buffer that we just fall back on to blame?
I think that when advisors look at the time that they spend, perhaps that's the frustration first and foremost, that they spend time on a document whereby no one gets to see it.
Yes.
Think of a builder building foundations that no one gets to see. So there are lots of things that we do that no one gets to see. So Craig's plumber puts the pipes in.
The best stormwater I've ever seen. And I said to him, I wish I could put a glass floor so people could see this. It's so beautiful.
So it's just a little reminder that lots of things that we do within our industry, we do it because it's the right thing to do. And it's the right thing to do because it's not just the document, it's the disciplined process that we go through to make sure that we're working in the client's best interest, that we've done appropriate research. And yes, theoretically, it could be slightly simpler through that process, but we keep focusing on this document as if changing this document instantly makes advice more affordable, instantly makes advice more accessible. I guarantee you, if you spend 50% less time on an SOA from next week, it doesn't instantly mean you're going to drop your price of your service. I often talk about that advisors make the mistake of attaching the price to their SOA. And I have this rant about don't attach your price to the worst document in the world, because essentially it's going to decrease happiness the moment the client gets it, because they say, I paid $3,000 for this. And the answer is no, you haven't paid for the document. You paid for the advice and the service. But when you attach your fee to this document, you cause that problem. So we're thinking about here going, let's not focus our efforts on this statement of advice. And so what do we need to focus on, Craig, in terms of the narrative about making advice more accessible?
It's about how do consumers start to understand that they want it and that they need it, and how do they put the value to it. So the price of advice, I tend to sit back and go, if once someone's valued it, does it really matter what the price of that advice is? Like you just said before, I need to sell my house. I need someone to sell that house. They're taking a big chunk of the sale value of that home. And so they should, if they've done what they needed to do to facilitate that. But people tend to view that, it's not my money. It is, because that's what your house sold for, and you got the net proceeds minus the fee for that because you needed to sell your house. How do we get young people to understand that they need to retire one day? And I think this next generation, like my kids, don't feel it as much as I did. And everyone probably says this, the next generation's got it so much easier. I'm becoming that old guy, Dean. My kids think they're in Club Med. Jack would be going, I don't even know why I need to think about retiring. Yet, he works at Domino's. He's got a super fund. Does he understand really what it's invested in, what it should be invested in, how it should be invested, so that he can start to set up for his future?
So there's an element there of financial literacy, which we will come back. The second component, I think, that was important that you said was this story around that we ended up, lost my train of thought. That's only happened once. It's only ever happened once through this process as well. It's being face to face is a little bit more difficult. Craig's rolling his eyes. But the accessibility of dropping the regulation doesn't necessarily mean we're going to do this. Our penetration is, generally speaking, disappointingly low. If we look at our friends who are mortgage specialists or mortgage brokers, they have a really high penetration into a market with the banks. And it's 70 or 80% of all loans are done through mortgage brokers. And so it's really interesting to observe that industry and say, how did they create this understanding that in order for you to work with a bank, which is what a mortgage, getting a home loan, in order for you to work with a bank, don't go to the bank directly. We will be the intermediary to help navigate all of those processes. And they've got a huge penetration in that market. And so as financial advisors, we have not had the same success.
Don't go to the super, come to us.
Yeah, don't go to your super fund directly. We will be the intermediary. Don't make all of these decisions. We will be the intermediary. And it's really good to reflect. We might have to get a mortgage broker on the podcast to really get an insight. But what are the things that the mortgage industry might be doing that we're not? Because it's complicated.
Let's start with, like, I've been using words interjectly, want and need, and that kind of thing, right? Like, people don't want a home loan. If they want a home loan, they can have one. They need a home. There's the house. I need it. I need to borrow money to get it. That helps. People should need advice. And this is what we're talking about, making it more accessible. But it starts when they're young. In my mind, it's how do we give them access to it when they're young and affordable? And then how does that transfer into getting older and then having more and more advice, and then that evolution, regardless what document we have to use, regardless of how we have to tell the client we're charging for it. And just so the listeners understand, I completely agree that all of the things that have been placed on you as a firm, there's a number of all of those legislations that are absolutely ridiculous and mean nothing to the end user and are just confusing, and they do get in your way and their process stuck. But I'm trying to let you see past that, because continually talking about that isn't going to affect change. We've been doing that for how long, Dean?
20 years.
It's not going to affect change. So it's not that we disagree with it. We're saying just get over it. But the narrative has to change. We need people to need advice.
So how do we do that? Because that does make sense. I need a mortgage, so I need a mortgage broker to help me.
Yep.
I need a house, or I need to sell my house, so therefore I need a real estate agent. And probably the misconception about financial advisors is that we only do investing.
Yeah.
And so this might be the narrative change, is that I need a financial advisor to help me make financial decisions because I don't want to do those on my own. You can sell a house on your own, you can get a mortgage on your own, but the partnership solves some of the problems whereby you don't have all of the information. So the story is, how do we change a narrative to say people need financial advice? All financial advisors know that they add value. How do we change that narrative to get people to say, I need a financial advisor?
Yeah. It's like, I book a holiday, I need a travel agent now. It's hard to book it on your own. If you're booking a big complex holiday, it's actually hard. So you need a travel agent. So you get one and you engage them. And the value you get is peace of mind.
Absolutely.
There's no difference here for us, but it's how do we, and I don't know if I've got all the answers, if one at all maybe, but it's how do we get people to realize they need advice so that they have access to us?
Yeah. And so this is not about the price of advice.
No.
So the thing about what all of our clients would understand, all the advisors and the clients that come in, is that most of them do not turn away the option of advice based on the price of the advice. So if you take a client through your process, whatever that might be, when they're agreeing to become a client, they accept the price predominantly because you've educated them on what the value creation is and what the problems are that you as a financial advisor actually solve. And so we don't have the same voice out there in the world around financial advice.
No. And I just think it's time now that we can shift focus to that and figure out how. And instead of talking about what tech stack does my firm have and what document are we using and all of those things, what's accessible to me to make advice accessible to the people I want to interact with, whether it's I want to interact with them right now or I want to ring fence them and interact with them later. There's stuff out there now that you can go and look at, and maybe we'll talk to a few of those people along the journey too, Dan, just to see where that stuff's at. But I don't know, like I said to you before we came on this, Dan, I'm like, I'm a bit nervous about the narrative, but I'm not trying to shift away from there are issues, but those issues they're not being solved. The government doesn't care. If they did, it would be done and dusted and through and done. They've got bigger fish to fry. So we can either keep focusing on that narrative or we can take control. We can own the narrative of making advice more accessible to more people through our firms.
Absolutely. And we have to get a clear message to the community. And so the element of, if you were ever to find yourself in the room with a politician, as in probably what happened for the last 6 months before the election, is that politicians are trying to understand different markets that they're involved in, or the members, the constituents are involved in. And so the clarity that all of us need to have is we need to have one story as to what the true issues are. The moment we go in and focus internally and say, I'm a really good financial advisor, but I'd be better if my document process was better, if I could do smaller SOAs, for example. Politicians don't care about that because it's not in their speak, in their language, and what the consumers understand. And so it's really important that we are all clear, and maybe you're slightly less clear based on this podcast, but I think the work that we need to do going forward as an industry is actually get clear on what the issues are from the consumer's perspective, not our compliance perspective.
Yeah.
So more people if we should be embarrassed by, as an industry, that there's so many Australians that are in accumulation phase above 65.
Yeah.
That's our problem. That's such a good message that we could champion. As advisors, we understand retirement phase in superannuation. There are hundreds of thousands of people out there that are above the age 65 that haven't been turned on to pension phase, most likely because they haven't engaged with a financial advisor to understand the impacts of that. That's a narrative that a politician could understand because we can put it into dollars and cents. The consumer is paying more tax than they should be because they haven't got this advice. And so that's just one example where we can change the narrative to focus on the end outcome of the end consumer in around the advice. That drives and opens everyone's eyes and going, we need to make advice more accessible because there's real customer outcomes through that process.
Yeah, and just shift tack a little bit. One of the things I saw during COVID is how robust financial advice actually really is. Businesses performed during COVID because, funnily enough, people got more free time. And so they did start to think about these things, and they did realise that they needed it. And so you saw it in the networks that I operate in, the spheres I operate in, you genuinely saw an increase in revenue for those firms through that COVID period. And I sat there and looked at it and said, the government needs to look at that and how robust we are as a part of the economy as well, as small businesses, and the role we play in the Australian economy. But you're right, the whole message to government needs to shift, because if I'm in the government, I've got to define benefit super anyway, probably. What does it matter? I don't actually get the issue. I'm not going to face into the realness of that. Like,
I did stir someone up once and ask them what their financial advisor said, and they looked it straight back in the eyes and say, I wouldn't have a financial advisor. And this is an example of someone that was significantly involved in government in our industry, refusing to have a financial advisor and not even being open to the conversation, and most likely just assumed that financial advisors do investments and that's all.
Yeah.
So it's a big narrative change that I think is important that we focus on externally to our industry. And so one day, if you could imagine that the Financial Advice Association has an advertisement on TV, these are the things we should be focused on overall in these messages.
Yeah, and one of the best things I've ever done, I think I've spoken this before, is go and interact with clients of financial advisors. And I said to one of them, if you could explain this advisor in one word, what would it be? And this lady said huggable. Right? But if you get that message out, it's not about dollars. It's not about cents. It's about having a buddy. It's like a finance buddy where everything's going to be okay because they've got you.
Yep.
And they're the kind of messages that need to project out so that we can make advice more accessible, because people will then decide they need it.
Absolutely. So that was our rant episode.
Rant.
Just we went on a couple of tangents of compliance and the like, but we're trying to get a narrative out to the industry of something that we believe in, is that we want more Australians to get high quality financial advice. We know that those Australians who do get advice benefit from that, quantifiably and non-quantifiably, in terms of dollars and cents well-being. And so we know these facts and we've studied these facts. The disappointing thing is there's millions of Australians that haven't yet been able to go on that journey, and we need to bring people into that story. And this is a supply and demand thing, is that when it is demanded at that level, we will come up with ways to do more advice to more Australians at scale. That's a great problem, but let's focus on that as the secondary problem after we get plenty of people knocking at the door asking for advice.
Sounds like a plan, mate.
Thank you, Craig.
Thanks.
That was Uncommon Sense. We'll see you next time.
Bye, everyone.